Hey guys, welcome back to the Gut Girls podcast. Today we are diving into one of the most, I would say, confusing symptom patterns that we see in the gut girl world, which is histamine reactions. And that's kind of a broad statement, histamine reactions. So we are going to break this down for you today. But this is where we typically see women come to us saying things like, I react to absolutely everything, or foods that I react to are so random that I can't pinpoint which one is causing the reaction. They'll say one day I'm fine, and then the next day I'm itchy and bloaty, anxious. They'll have heart palpitations because their heart is racing, and they just can't pinpoint why. And so what makes this so stressful is the unpredictability. I mean, I couldn't even imagine living that way. And there's really no clear rule book for it. And so a food that could feel safe yesterday suddenly feels, unsafe today. And that can also cause this fear of food, which we know is not a healthy place to be. So naturally, what we see is women end up in this deep Google search, and that also can feel frustrating because you get down, the rabbit hole of different histamine intolerances like mast cell activation syndrome, POTS, which is like the orthostatic, hypertension, and then EDS, which is your Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And basically, all that to be said is they're trying to understand what's wrong with my body and why do I feel so reactive, and they feel broken. So what we want to unpack today is something really important. Histamine reactions are rarely just about histamine foods. Guys, there's usually a very much deeper story happening here.
Yeah, and so we're going to get into that in just a minute. But so this is where kind of the confusion all starts to make sense a little bit. And especially after we've worked with lots and lots of clients over the years, especially the ones that come to us that they're already thinking, hey, I think this is a histamine reaction. Explain that, they're kind of already Googled, just like you said, where they're like, I feel like it is histamine because I have the face flushing, I have the headaches, I have the heart racing, the anxiety, sometimes even dizziness. And they're like, I mean, these symptoms are real. They're not just little subtle, little here or there, something going on, but they're actually symptoms that are keeping them from living their life the fullest. And so, but the truth to it is that the actual histamine is not the enemy itself, because that's actually a completely normal chemical messenger that's involved in our immune response. It's involved in digestion and the brain signaling and so many different aspects of our life. So it's not really histamine itself that's the problem. It's really the regulation of the histamine production. And so when these symptoms arise during this histamine production, it exceeds the amount that our body can kind of break it down, or our mast cells become overly reactive. And again, we're going to go into this a little bit more, but this is kind of a laugh because we're the gut girls and we're like, this is heavily influenced by the gut. We talk a lot about inflammation levels, especially looking at a GI map test. What does that look like? We talk about the capacity for the proper digestion. We talk about the nervous system. So, a lot of times people, that's why they think they look for, hormone panels, and they look for all these other things. But we're like, hey, this is really why we have to go back to that foundational work and look at the gut first and make sure that all of that, that foundation is laid really, really well before, potentially moving on to further functional lab testing and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think just to speak back to why symptoms feel super random, like you had mentioned, this was key when you said it's more about the regulation of the histamine response. And so the symptoms feel random because we don't even know, or the person listening is like, I don't even know what regulates my histamine. They have no idea. And so you're throwing darts at a wall and you're chasing your tail. And so that's where we want to get real with you today, is to say, okay, your histamine responses are dynamic. And so they're influenced by stress, by sleep, by your hormones. So women, think about your monthly cycle, by, like Diana said, the gut, the digestion efficiency, pregnancy and, like she said, the inflammation. So it's not just what you're eating. And then the other thing that's interesting that where I typically see women come is post-viral, because we talk about this so much. I think we have an entire podcast on it about after a virus, you can't just jump back in to everyday eating and living. There's this recovery period. We, in fact, have it in our resource library on our membership of you got to go back and heal the gut after a virus or after having to be on antibiotics for bacterial infection or something like that. Because if you don't, that's where we start to see these histamine responses become upticked. So it's post-sickness, post-viral activation, and then we never go back to the baseline of like normalcy. And so then you do become more sensitive when stress hits. You're like, well, I never responded this way before. My histamine response was never this bad before, but now it's out of control. And I even see it a lot postpartum, Diana, with women who they know they have a histamine sensitivity, and then they're pregnant and they have their baby and they're like, wow, all of a sudden my histamine reactions are through the roof. So that goes back to like even those heart palpitations or that anxiety, because histamine high levels can cause that, but also their response to food, their skin changes and everything. And it's because they just went through this huge stressor, and that type of stress is what can influence this dynamic, level of histamine that your body goes through. And the other thing to mention too is you guys have heard of like vagus nerve. In fact, I would say in today's world, it's more talked about because they have the vagus nerve stimulators, which are basically little, tools or machines that you can buy that you can wear or put against your chest to stimulate your vagus nerve. So we are talking about it more, but a lot of people with histamine don't quite know how to, or I should say with histamine uptick, like mast cell activation and whatnot, they don't quite know how to tap into their vagus nerve. And it seems almost impossible for them to do that, no matter how hard they try. And that's where, the gut helps, because looking at the gut can help, because if you have gut dysbiosis, like you mentioned, Diana, or inflammation, if you address that first, you then get this better relationship with your own body and how to tap in to the vagus nerve, and it doesn't become as exhausting as maybe they've experienced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is also where we find, so people start, buying all the things. I buy the things for the vagus nerve stimulation, and then I do elimination diet. I take these foods out. Everything's causing me problems. So like they do like this massive elimination diet. And honestly, it probably helps with their flares. So I'm not necessarily saying like don't do that, but a lot of times it's just temporary relief. And a lot of times if you're not journaling, you kind of don't figure it out along the way too. So I would say if you're going to do that, like make sure you're journaling your progress too, and like what's happening. But a lot of times that's why it's really only temporary relief, because to like reducing that histamine load doesn't like really get to the root of why your overall system is kind of struggling. And so the histamine, the dysregulation, as we kind of like start to peel these layers back and dive a little bit deeper, just like you mentioned, that comes from digestion, like impaired digestion. We talk a lot about on the stool test, are we actually secreting the enzymes that we need to break down the foods that we're eating? Is there a massive amount of inflammation that's in the colon, that's in the gut, that's not allowing our body to function normally? And this histamine release is in abundance, right? This microbial balance, the nervous system, which of course we just talked about just a minute ago, nutrient depletion, again, if we're not actually absorbing the nutrients that we're eating, because all of that plays into exactly what we're looking at. And so before we even go a little bit deeper, even with the gut part of it, you have to do the foundational work. So like some of the really simple things, we talk about the foundation and the basics and stuff, but let's talk about it, Angela. Give us like some some like very tangible things before you go more into the gut part. Like, what are some of the very tangible things that these people that are experiencing this, these listeners that are experiencing this, what can they do? What should they do for some of those more foundational tools?
Yeah, and again, they are the foundational tools, and I think we tend to skip over them because when you go down that Google search and you're like, oh, mast cell activation syndrome, I have that. It can't be that simple, we think, but we're here to tell you. We've seen it time and time again. It is where you need to start. I'm not saying it's all you have to do, but it is where you need to start. So, one of the biggest thing, and this is, like I said, because we know testing is incredibly helpful. I'm not saying that you don't test, but think of things like stabilizing blood sugar. Diana, you and I talk about this all the time. And the reason why I would say start here for you folks that are listening is it is going to give you probably one of the quickest responses. You could get the test, but you're going to be waiting, weeks to get it back. And typically any type of long-term healing takes time, when you could be journaling like Dana talks about all the time, and stabilizing your blood sugar. In mast cell activation syndrome, mast cells are a type of cell that's a part of our immune system. And so when I'm not stabilizing my blood sugar, which would look like skipping breakfast, maybe I'm intermittent fasting because I was told that it's the best thing for me, or I'm trying to lose weight and it's the only way I can lose weight. So maybe you're like doing that, but then in that sense, you're not maybe doing it right. And I'm not putting anyone down that's doing that, but just take this like rabbit hole for me. Go down this rabbit hole with me for a hot minute of when someone comes to me and they say they're intermittent fasting. I remind them quickly, yes, there's a ton of value to that. But you also realize then that you have to get in adequate protein in that feeding window. And I just know most women that I talk to already struggle getting protein in when they're eating 3 meals a day. So when they cut themselves down to this little intermittent feeding window, you've got to get it in. And if you do that without knowing that your digestion is maybe dysregulated, like Diana, you nailed it when you said, what about digestive juices and enzyme release? Like, what if they don't have enough hydrochloric acid in their body? What if their pancreas isn't releasing the right enzymes, and then they try to intermittent fast and put all this food into just a few hours of a feeding window, and then they wonder why their histamine responses are through the roof? It's because you're not digesting and you're trying to squeeze it all into this window, and most likely you're under eating protein. So now your blood sugar is all over the place, and what that's going to do is trigger cortisol, which, guys, is only going to put your immune system, the mast cells, on more alert. So you are basically feeding that pattern. So stabilize blood sugar. We can discuss the reasons why you're not losing weight later, but you will never lose the weight if your body is in this cycle, right? So stabilize the blood sugar, get enough protein in. We talk about this so much in our basics guide and our nutrition guide. And so that's your focus, right? And you're going to eat regular meals with adequate protein, and that can dramatically change symptoms. So that's one thing. Second, we talk about prioritizing protein, but I would even take that a step farther as eating the proteins that are maybe a little bit more leaner. And then we go into this in our membership about how do you actually prepare the protein. So for people with mast cell or high histamine reactions, first of all, eating lean meat is number one. A lot of times too, when we think of lean meat, we talk a lot about bone broth on our podcast and our membership. Sometimes people with histamine reactions can't even handle bone broth. So it's getting educated on what is that source of protein that is right for you if you are very histamine like loaded. And honestly, the GI map can help us narrow that down so much. So that's why I love getting that test done. But just to go back to the basics, try leaner proteins and journal. Diana, so much you talk about that. But if you intake bone broth and you have a reaction, you only are going to be able to identify that through trial and error of journaling and trying again. And then in the same breath, we've had so many clients start out that way, but once they healed the gut, I think most people stop there. They're like, I can't even intake protein because I tried the cleanest source like bone broth and it doesn't work. But guys, let me tell you, we've had clients, I think of one particularly that couldn't do bone broth, and now she drinks it every day. And that's because she went through and repaired her nervous system, and because she worked on those digestive secretion of hydrochloric acid and enzyme production. So it is possible to go from not being able to eat a protein like bone broth to be able to digest that. But if that is you, start with simpler proteins and maybe work on marinating those proteins. Using like healthy marinades, we talk about like the Primal Kitchen brand. We teach this in our Gut Girls program. Marinating those meats actually does help you digest it. So it's an easier way to get that protein in. And then one of the things with histamine is reducing the leftover foods. A lot of people are not aware of this, but the longer the food sits in the fridge, the more histamine production it creates. And so narrowing down, reducing the overall leftovers, so you are going to have to eat fresh when if this is you and you're listening. And that might sound at first like hard, because you're like, I have to cook everything every single time I want to eat it. Well, histamine does accumulate in stored food, so you do have to know this, and you have to be able to identify which foods are triggering that you might have batch cooked and then you're eating days on end, and we can help you do that. And then lastly, which I kind of already said, but support digestion. Things like mindful eating, so slowing down, putting your fork down in between bites, definitely help, because if you have histamine and you are just eating, you're a fast eater, you're the first one to leave the table, this is not going to help you at all. You want to slow down, eat mindfully, chew your food, and I would even say reduce the amount of water you're drinking while you're eating, because you're just basically diluting those digestive juices, and we want you to schedule time in for meals. I know a lot of histamine clients that also work like night shifts or off shifts, and they just don't make time for those meals, and that is so important.
Yeah, so just to add kind of a couple more, you've kind of already mentioned, cooking your food fresh, which, like you said, that actually, it's funny as you were saying that, I was like, man, a lot of these things are kind of things that I do. I eat a lot of leftovers because I batch cook, so. And our goal for helping our clients that are dealing with this is that this is just a short healing phase for them, and that they can get back to doing things like batch cooking like I do, because man, I mean, I would have a hard time eating if I had to eat fresh every time. Right now, I'm just in a season of my life where my girls are teenagers and very busy, and we live a life on the go and active. We love to be outside, especially as it's warming up now. And so, we try to be prepared by batch cooking and making sure that we always have like proteins prepared. And so right now, somebody dealing with histamine, that would not be the best, most optimal thing for you. And that's where I would say in this season, you need to focus more on your nutrition and on the food part of that. Because you also really need to not do a whole lot of aged foods, things like aged cheeses, and really that even comes down to like alcohol, like that, wine and whiskey. Those are aged type foods. A lot of times are not going to serve you well if you believe that this histamine is a problem for you. So that would be something that you needed to eliminate. I would say even things like processed meats, those are all aged and really can kind of cause that additional, flair for you. So those are things that you want to avoid. Smoked meats. Again, we eat smoked meats in our house. We have a smoker, and but so some of these things are kind of a staple in my house, but if that's you, then right now during this season, we would suggest that that's something that you don't do. Some fermented foods, again, Angela talks all the time about having fermented foods. So that's why this podcast is a little bit different, because we are sort of hitting on something that's a little bit different, group of listeners, I guess I would say, that are kind of experiencing this, because we choose these podcasts based on what we hear from you guys, and so we know that this is not really going to hit all the masses, and some people won't even know what histamine means. But that's why we love to do these podcasts. So sometimes they're for everybody and sometimes they're not. But if that is you, then some of those things that are kind of the staples in our lifestyle and our habits that we do is not necessarily something that you should do right now during this healing journey for you. So you want to kind of focus on those simple meals. I usually say literally the simpler you can make it, the better. Baking your chicken, baking your foods, like cooking your vegetables, not eating them raw, some of those things, like keeping it really simple and easy for the digestive part is really going to be a home run for you at this point. But really, like we already mentioned about the nervous system, but that's such a huge part of it as well. We mentioned diaphragmatic breathing or, slow nasal breathing. Some people call it box breathing. There's a lot of different words for it, but all of it basically is trying to get you to avoid, I'm holding my chest right now, to avoid breathing in so much from the chest and really, more from the diaphragm, from the lower part, because all of those tools can kind of help. Really, even some gentle movement. One of the things that I find interesting that Angela really introduced me to several years ago, talking about this nervous system, is it's so interesting how a lot of times, like babies they hum or we sing to them. Yeah, it's because it's calming their nervous system, or they know how to calm their own nervous system because they may be humming themselves, or if you're humming to them, or the vibration, these seats and stuff that have been created. A lot of these things are not, my kids are teenagers now, so 16 years ago these things weren't around, but they're really cool now. I'm like, golly, that they really have it going on with these vibration things. But some of that is really to stimulate, and to calm the nervous system, and try to allow our body to just be able to have a calmer and more relaxed state. Drive it back into that rest and digest as much as possible so that our body can sleep, because we have to have the rest. Angela mentioned, a lot of our clients and a lot of the people that I see in one of my other businesses is people come in, they're exhausted, they're not sleeping. And so it's this kind of like vicious cycle. And it's like, you got to get back to the foundations, and really kind of work on the sleeping part of that, and especially for those of you that, work third shift, it makes it really, really challenging for you. So you have to be, super on your game to make sure that you're getting sleep. But that's really all a really huge part of that healing journey. So you kind of have to work on those pillars to be able to kind of heal from this.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because, okay, let's just talk for a minute. I said the mast cell activation syndrome. I threw out earlier, POTS, which is the postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And then there's EDS, which is involved in this mix, which is like the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so some of you might be listening and be like, I've never heard of those. And that's okay. And like Dana said, but some of you have gone down the rabbit hole of this because you're just living it day in and day out. And you know everything that Google has to say about these. But what I really want to remind you is these are complex conditions. Like the nervous system is really what impacts these the most. Okay. And so when you know that, like, for instance, histamine even influences vascular responses. So that's like the POTS that I was talking about, where people will have like the heart palpitations with it, and sometimes the anxiety level. But I think what's so interesting is everything we experience in life, guys, it's, I believe, a call for change. I mean, we are meant to change. Like that, if we're not changing, we're dying. I think that's a quote from somebody. I couldn't say who, but like, it's the truth. If you're not evolving, you're dying. And so when you get these symptoms, I want to change every person's mindset that's listening that is heavy in this pattern or these symptoms, to say, it might be your body trying to wake you up to a new lifestyle pattern. Like Dana said, sleep is so important, and stimulating the vagus nerve is so important. And so maybe a question for you right now is, look back at your lifestyle. Does it actually allow or give you space to do that? Because sometimes that is what pain or symptoms can be. It's almost like a little bit of a wake up call to say you're not living in alignment with what your body needs. And so, yes, that may take some time to change. We don't expect you to like change that tomorrow, but it wakes you up to like, okay, no, I'm not. And I need to start the, hamster wheel of making these changes. Like I need to start that momentum of making the changes, but they're not all going to happen tomorrow. And I say that because most of the clients that I see, even being a chiropractor here in Virginia, they'll come into my office and some of them will be like, I am, like you said, Diana, I'm using the vibration plate. I am, not eating, like I've got a list, like I'm not eating leftovers. I'm taking every supplement that I've Googled. Like I have all these appointments. I'm doing all these things. And they look at me and they're like, but I'm not any better. And that's where I have to have that hard talk with them of like, I'm so glad that you've spent the time to research the things that can help these symptoms, but you're missing the big call on your life, which is like reorganizing and prioritizing some of these things. And the other thing is stress management. Like, what are you doing about stress management? All of these things are great. They're fun, fancy tools. But if you have to depend on something to activate your vagus nerve and, the vibration plate and all of this, it's like, don't you feel totally just dependent on everyone else and every tool out there to stay alive? And that has to be hard, right? Like that has to be a hard place to be. So I think the biggest thing is like, these are complex conditions, but histamine regulation is key. And to know how to do that on your own is huge. And so that's where, honestly, I think the gut, Diana, can play one of the biggest roles in this, because in the Gut Girls, the benefit of the GI map is huge, right?
I know, that's exactly what I was just thinking. I was like, man, so if that is you and you've really kind of Dr. Googled everything, you've tried the elimination diet, you're doing the nervous system work, it's like, okay, so now I've kind of started to connect I follow obviously our podcast, so I know that the GI map test is a tool that they use, and I think I have this histamine problem. And so then they start like, again, almost kind of going like down a deeper hole where they're like, okay, so maybe it's H. pylori. Maybe it's this dysbiosis, this word that keeps popping up on Google or on ChatGPT or whatever it is. Maybe they've done a stool test where it shows that they have some elevated inflammatory markers, or it could be a stool test, or it could even be a blood test that shows those elevation, that the additional inflammation that they have just kind of going on in their body. Or maybe they've said, I think I have leaky gut. Like, is the leaky gut what's causing the, this additional like histamine response? And so once they've kind of started doing that, they've started making that connection between the gut and the histamine. And that's again why we use this GI map tool.
Yeah, and I love it because it takes it from that broad restriction that I just talked about, that client that comes in that's like, I'm on this tight diet and I am limited on time because I'm doing all these appointments and all these tools throughout the day. It takes it from that to this very precise like support plan where you can be like, okay, for instance, H. pylori, we talk about it all the time. We've done several podcasts on it. It is a nervous system bug. And so it's like sometimes we get to see like that on a person's GI map results and say, okay, so really in reality, yes, you can work on, maybe normalizing these levels of H. pylori in your gut. But what it really means is you do need to restructure your day to have more of like a routine where it's like Diana, you and I, we're like clockwork. It's like you wake up, around the same time every day. You're eating your 3 meals around the same time every day. You're going to bed. We make sure we're getting outside to get sunlight on a regular basis. We keep each other accountable for that, in fact, and getting, a little bit of movement in. It's like clockwork. I could call Diana and know exactly where she's at in her day just because, again, it's not this huge thing that's going to bring you guys back to healing. It's the everyday little obedient steps that you take in your routine that really bring it home. And the GI map just kind of helps you know the precision of what that is. And so for some of you, we get to see like, okay, you are not getting, I mean, it's clear on this test that you are not getting or digesting your protein. So we know that's what we have to focus on. And we have to come together and determine what that looks like for you versus the next person. Or heck, we know from looking at this test, like carbohydrates, like even down to the fiber component, you can't handle them. So how do we come together and really introduce for you what that support plan is going to look like to bring up this diversity in your gut when you can't handle fiber, right? Like it's so specific and precise that I just feel like you get the whole picture instead of chasing, your tail. And in the midst of it, you get the nervous system component with it because they go hand in hand, right?
Yeah, and I love that. It helps give us clarity too. Using the GI map test, using these nervous system components, kind of like you're talking about, like kind of pulling the whole picture together. I feel like that's kind of what helps us get through these times. And I love that you mentioned about, you knowing kind of what my day is. Just to give you guys kind of a real life moment, Angela and I send like voice texts to each other and stuff all the time. And she sent me one this morning, just very real life, like, hey, I'm just having a moment. I'm just sitting on the couch. Like, I'm just trying to pull myself together. And so I literally sent her a voice text back and was like, put your tennis shoes on and call me. And so she knows exactly what that means. I'm like, you got to get outside. Take a minute, get away from your computer, we need to reset. And so we do that in our community. And I love that so much about the Gut Girls community, obviously about my relationship with Angela, because we do take it a little step further than what we do in the community, but we love the community. And, we have people that are posting what they're eating and all those kind of things. So if this is you and you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I know I've tried a lot of different things. I've really Dr. Googled. I know that there's probably a gut component to it, but maybe you're like, I haven't really done what they're talking about as far as like the foundational work. And what that means is that we even have in our tier 1 membership, which is just $15 a month, we have a quick relief guide. And you guys, honestly, that could get some people like 50% better just by having, I hear Angela's dog in the background.
I hear it too.
Here we are on the podcast, real life. But you can dive so deep into, the foundational work, and it really proves so positively for you that you might get the response that you're looking for, and like the healing that you're looking for, where these huge flares aren't happening just by doing this quick relief guide. And so that's where we actually always want people to get started, because we're like, if the nervous system piece, like if your stress is just so heightened all the time, if you eat out most of your meals, if if all of those things, then it's like, hey, we got to take you back to the basics and just make sure that you live in tier 1 for a couple of months where you're getting these new habits and this new routine down, kind of like Angela and I are talking about, where your body is like in a place of rest and digest, ready for healing. And so you can start in that tier 1 membership. Honestly, you guys can go to our website, gutgirls.health, and you scroll down on the homepage, and it kind of lays out for you the different tiers of memberships that we have there. And you can sign up immediately for the $15 one. You don't have access to everything inside the portal at the $15 one, but you do have access to the training vault, which is where we're talking about, where you can get the nutrition piece. You can get the quick relief guide, which is really, honestly, I know we created it, but we think it's awesome, especially for $15 to get all of those kind of resources where you don't have to try to chat GPT and Google and whatever. We're doing this on not only on research, but on our own experience from ourselves, but also from the hundreds and hundreds of clients that we've worked with, is how we designed that. So you would just start in the tier 1, and then it's for the tier 2 that does require what we call a free discovery call to go into that next tier, to make sure that you have done all the foundational work, to make sure that you have all the expectations that what tier 2 requires for healing to be able to do that GI map test. And so that's why we require that discovery call, because we want you guys to be successful. We don't want to just say, oh, okay, well, join us. And we want to make sure that you're ready to join us and that you're ready for this journey and this transformation. And so you can do that all from our website. You can, like I said, sign up for the $15 tier 1 membership and get really some great information, as well as our resource library is also there. You can also have access to our Gut Girls Group Me app, and so you can go ahead and join part of our community through there. And then of course, once you do tier 2, then that's where you have access to live calls that we do weekly and so much more in that one. But let's make sure that you have that foundation piece first. Angela, as we kind of close up, is there anything else I missed?
You directed them so well, and I would just, as I listened to you, I'm like, gosh, that tier 1, that's $15 a month, the community alone, the value that you'll get out of that, it's going to serve you so well, because even especially these histamine patients that we, hear about, and the clients that we get to coach through, guys, a lot of times it's, believe it or not, it's those people that I get to talk to that they don't have anyone else, right? Like they don't. And sometimes it's those type of client, it's that type of client that's like, if I just had someone to walk through this with me, the burden of it wouldn't feel so heavy. And believe it or not, guys, the body keeps the score. So when you have a community where you can just show up as yourself and be real and be like, you can get on our group me and be like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like if it's like a plantain or like chia seeds, like we just had a client post this morning about her breakfast, and she tried one of the recipes that we recommended for chia seed pudding, and she's loving it to keep her healthy on the go in a busy world. And it's like, you can show up there and just be super real, and we will coach you through that, because that is healing in itself, especially for these histamine people. Imagine your immune system, right? It responds to a world of isolation as well. And so I feel like when you're in community, that alone brings a level of healing that ChatGPT, because I know everyone's doing these days, it cannot provide you. It just can't. And so that $15 tier, I just want to promote it one more time to say, guys, if that's the only thing you do after listening to this podcast, it will get you 10 times farther than what you've been trying on your own, because it's in community that I think you can let down those walls a little bit and just show up and be like, oh, there's other people out there that are living this way, versus the world that's like, go through McDonald's and own 3 companies and homeschool your kids and do all. It's like, we can't do all that. And then you get into the community where we're like Diana this morning with me was beautiful, just to help walk me through. And guys, it's going to change the way that I show up the rest of the day. Literally that changed it. And so we want you to experience that too. So that $15 tier 1 is epic, and we can't wait to see you in it. And we hope this just helped educate you a little bit more about these histamine responses that everyone's kind of talking about, the mast cell, the POTS, the EDS. If that's you, there is hope. We even have, just FYI, one last thing, we even have an awesome Pilates instructor that does virtual appointments that we have kind of teamed up with a little bit. If that's you, that's like, I've got this histamine reaction, and every time or this mast cell or POTS or EDS, whichever one, and you're like, every time I try to work out, I'm hurting myself. I don't know how to do it correctly. I feel like I'm lost in the space of health and movement. Guys, we have someone. We've vetted her out. She's amazing. And we can provide you with those kind of resources in a community, instead of you going down this trial and error and getting injured all the time with different things that just sound good right now. You know what I mean? So don't miss out on that community. I think it's huge.
Yeah. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this. Like Angela said, you can head over to our website. Again, that's gutgirls.health. We will catch you on the next episode. The Gut Girls podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. We are not acting as licensed medical professionals. Always consult your doctor before making any changes to your health routine.